The miracle stories in the Bible are fascinating to us. All these hundreds of years later, we have heard the stories of Jesus feeding the 5,000, healing people, or calming the waters more than once. We can't help but wonder, is that true? Did it really happen that way? Taking off our skeptical hats, let's remember that the miracle stories in the Bible can be seen as illustrations of God's power. The people who were at the events, later described as miracles, knew that something extraordinary had happened, and they came to believe that a prophet really was living among them. The reading from Mark this morning gives us the chance to reflect on miracles. Some people may think that God really does intervene in the events of human experience by interrupting the laws of nature. This story that we've heard today about God, through Jesus, calming the storm could be interpreted in such a straightforward way, or we can see it as being a little bit messier than that. There is a mixture in this story of fear, determination, human anxiety, and divine promise. Ron Miller, a writer and professor of religious studies at Lake Forest College in Illinois, gave this description: "A miracle is not an unusual event, but an event to which we pay unusual attention." He writes that our existence in this world is surrounded by miracles, and we hardly notice. If you want to experience the miraculous, we have to allow ourselves to notice. Personally, I am always ready to notice Mother Nature's miracles after a long, hard Canadian winter. When I spy the first green spike poking out from the mud and snow, it feels like a miracle. It's one of those, wow, look at that, thank God moments. It happens every year, but it still feels like an extraordinary event. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way, because I see some of you folks posting pictures of the very same on Facebook. We want miracles to happen. We like miracles. Nobody ever says, gee, I hope no miracles happen today. What we do say is, this is not going to work unless a miracle happens. And what we need is a miracle. Please God. More than that, we need to believe in miracles, because when fear and anxiety are swamping us, we need to know that there is the potential of a miracle happening. The story in Mark tells of how frightened the disciples were. They feared that their boat would founder in the stormy waters. Anyone who has been in a boat where there is a chance of a capsize will understand. I spent a few years sailing in small sailboats when I lived in the UK. We sailed our boat on the River Humber in East Yorkshire. This river is tidal, and it was difficult to sail against the tides. So we sailed east towards the mouth of the river when the tide was going out, and westward when the tide was coming in. We used to say it was like sailing on cocoa, because the tides stirred the silt up so much that the water was always brown. One day, we decided to sail to the river mouth, which was called Spurn Point. There was a lighthouse there, and the land curved around, making a little sheltered bit. We intended to put out our anchor, have lunch, and just hang around for a while until the tide turned. The thing is, it was kind of tricky, because we had to let the anchor drop where it would grab in the riverbed in a spot that was not too deep nor too shallow. We dropped the sails and eased in towards the shore. We went aground. Our boat was a bilge keel, meaning it was not just a central keel, but two keels that came out from the bottom of the hull. Have you heard the expression, keep everything on an even keel? Well, that wasn't happening to us. The boat was well and truly stuck at an angle, with waves lapping and splashing near the deck. We began to panic. We were a few yards from shore in maybe 2 feet of water. I was the radio operator of our small craft. Mayday, mayday, mayday. There was a short pause before we got our reply. A voice came back over the radio. "Yeah, we see you." All these years later, I remember the tone of voice of the Coast Guard officer. It was sort of bored with an undercurrent of exasperation. "We'll keep an eye on you. Wait for the tide to come back in." So we did. Back to the disciples in their boat. No motor, no Coast Guard to call on the radio. Their boat is being swamped by the waves and in danger of sinking. Jesus is asleep in the back of the boat. The way the story is written, the disciples think that he is indifferent. They say, "Teacher, don't you care that we are all about to drown?" I think it actually shows how much confidence Jesus had in his disciples. He had faith in their abilities. The thing is that the disciples were very afraid. When the waters were calmed and it was smooth sailing again, they recognized that something extraordinary had happened. The story from the book of Mark is one of several which contains the element of Jesus making an impression on his disciples. At the time of this story, the disciples are still learning about him and his ways. It's only later that theologians studying the Bible stories say, well, that was a miracle and that was a miracle. Let's remember that miracles are not magic tricks performed to entertain or impress. They are an act that satisfied what is most needed. They are an answer to prayer. In the story of Jesus and the frightened disciples, he doesn't just calm their fears, he calms the storm-tossed lake so that they are once again safe on the water. Miracles are part of our popular culture. When something wonderful happens unexpectedly or after an enormous struggle, it can feel, well, like a miracle. And we say things like, "I thought we weren't going to make it. I never expected that to happen. It's a miracle. Thank God." Miracle is a word that is used in the news headlines. Can you remember Miracle on the Hudson? Captain Chelsea Sullenberger landed a plane on the Hudson River in January 2009 after both engines completely lost power due to being struck by Canadian geese. He was able to land the plane safely on the water without the plane breaking up. All on board survived. With our 21st century technology, the world was witness to that event. We saw the big plane floating with passengers stood out on the wings. Ferries headed to the plane from all directions and held their positions so that the passengers could be plucked to safety. Then a bit later, we were able to listen to the audio recording of the pilot radioing in his report of the loss of engines. I listened to the audio clip again while I was writing this reflection, and I just marveled at the calmness of the air traffic controller as he offered Captain Sullenberger alternate airport runways to return to. Captain Sullenberger's voice is calm, but his mind must have been racing as he considered what to do. His last reply heard on the radio is, "Can't do it, we'll be in the Hudson." He could not have known how it would all turn out, and that the extraordinary events would be described as a miracle. I imagine that in those 2 or 3 minutes, all he was thinking was, "I will give it my all, I will do my best." What about miracle on the ice? In the 1980 Winter Olympics, the U.S. ice hockey team, which was made up of college-age players, won the gold medal by defeating the Russian team, who were the 4 times champions. I'm a sucker for the Walt Disney movie of this story. But if you watch YouTube clips of the end of the actual gold medal game, you can hear the announcer shout above the roar of the crowd, "Do you believe in miracles?" Perhaps as I mention these headline-making miracles, your minds are wandering and other miracles are coming to mind. Let us not forget to remember the unsung miracles, like family members reconciled after a feud, someone turning their life around after years of substance abuse, or a young person finally focusing and enjoying school. Barbara Brown Taylor writes in her book, The Seeds of Heaven, the problem with miracles is that we tend to get mesmerized by them, focusing on God's responsibility and forgetting our own. She writes, stop waiting on a miracle and participate in one instead. Remember that there is no such thing as your bread or my bread. There is only our bread, as in give us this day our daily bread. However much you have, just bring it and believe it is enough to begin with, enough to get the ball rolling, enough to start a trend. Be the first in the crowd to turn your pockets inside out. Be the first on your block to start a miracle. I suggest that we forget how much power we have. A kindness given to another in an unexpected moment can feel like a miracle to that person. The practical help given will, of course, be the first part of the miracle, but then comes the echo. Being part of a miracle can make our spirits soar. Making miracles can lead to empowerment, friendships, and progress. My friends, we live our lives knowing that miracles are possible. Perhaps our chance to make a miracle is just around the corner. When we least expect it, we can make a miracle. Thank God.